Okay. 49. These precepts are given by those philosophers to whom you, Catullus, have the greatest attachment. A remark which I, the oftener make, that by referring to my authors I may avoid the charge of impertinence. Of what sort of impertinence, said Catullus, or what could be brought before us more elegant than this discussion of yours, or expressed more judiciously? But still, I am afraid, said Crassius, lest these matters should either appear to these youths too difficult for study, or lest, as they are not given in the common rules of instruction, I should appear to have an inclination that they should seem of more importance and difficulty than they really are. Petullius replied, You are mistaken, Crassius, if you imagine that either I or any of the company expected from you those ordinary or vulgar precepts. What you say is what we wish to be said, and not so much indeed to be said as to be said in the very manner in which you have said it. Nor do I answer for myself only, but for all the rest, without the least hesitation. And I, said Antonius, have at length discovered such a one as in the book which I wrote I said that I had never found a person of eloquence, but I never interrupted you, not even to pay you a compliment, for this reason that no part of the short time allotted for your discourse might be diminished by a single word of mine. To this standard, then, proceeded Crassius, is your style to be formed as well by the practice of speaking as by writing, which contributes a grace and refinement to other excellences, but to this in a more peculiar manner. Nor is this a matter of so much labor as it appears to be, nor are our phrases to be governed by the rigid laws of the cultivators of numbers and music. And the only object for our endeavors is that our sentences may not be loose or rambling, that they neither stop within too narrow a compass nor run out too far, that they are distinguished into clauses and have well rounded periods. Nor are you to use perpetually this fullness and, as it were, roundness of language, but a sentence is often to be interrupted by minuter clauses, which very clauses are still to be modulated by numbers. Nor let the peon or heroic foot give you any alarm. They will naturally come into your phrases. They will, I say, offer themselves and will answer without being called. Only let it be your care and practice, both in writing and speaking, that your sentences be concluded with verbs, and that the junction of those verbs with other words proceed with numbers that are long and free, especially the heroic feat, the first paean, or the cretic. But let the cadence be varied and diversified, for it is in the conclusion that sameness is chiefly remarked. And if these measures are observed at the beginning and at the conclusion of sentences, the intermediate numbers may be disregarded, but no, only let the compass of your sentence not be shorter than the ear expects, nor longer than your strength and breath will allow. 50. But if I think that the conclusions of periods ought to be studied more carefully than the former parts, because it is chiefly from these that the finish of style is judged, for in a verse the commencement of it, the middle, and the extremity are equally regarded, and in whatever part it fails, it loses its force. But in a speech few notice the beginnings, but almost all the closes of the periods, which, as they are observable and best understood, should be varied, lest they be disapproved either by the judgment of the understanding or by the satiety of the ear. For the 2 or 3 feet toward the conclusion are to be marked and noted if the preceding members of the sentence were not extremely short and concise, and these last feet ought either to be truchets or heroic feet, or those feet used alternately, or to consist of the latter person, of which Aristotle approves, or what is equal to it, the critic. An interchange of such feet will have these good effects, that the audience will not be tired by an offensive sameness, and that we shall not appear to make similar endings on purpose. But if the famous Antipater of Sidon, whom you, Catullus, very well remember, used to pour forth extempore, hexameter, and other verses in various numbers and measures, and if practice had so much power in a man of great ability and memory, that whatever he turned his thoughts and inclination upon verse, the words followed, of course, how much more easily shall we attain this faculty in oratory when application and exercise are used? Nor let any one word, nope, nor let any one wonder how the illiterate part of an audience observe these things when they listen to a speech, since in all other things as well as in this the force of nature is great and extraordinary for all men by a kind of tacit sense, tacit sense, without any art or reasoning, can form a judgment of what is right and wrong in art and reasoning, and as they do with regard to picture statues and other works for understanding which they have less assistance from nature, so they display this faculty much more in criticizing words, numbers, and sounds of language, because these powers are inherent in our common senses, nor has nature intended that any person should be utterly destitute of judgment in these particulars. All people are accordingly moved, not only by words artfully arranged, but also by numbers and the sounds of the voice. How few are those that understand the science of numbers and measures. Yet if in these the smallest offense be given by an actor, so that any sound is made too short by contraction or too long by extension, whole theaters burst into exclamations. Does not the same thing also happen with regard to musical notes, that not only whole sets and bands of musicians are turned out by the multitude and the populace for varying one from another, but even single performers for playing out of tune?